Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you the top 5 books that I read over the course of this winter. So basically the premise of the setup of this video is that I'm going to go through all the books that I read over December, January, and February, their rating, and at the end I'll talk more about my top 5. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting out December, I first reread the Queen of the Tearling trilogy. So for the first book, I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The second book a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the final book a 5 out of 5 stars. And then I also ended up rereading A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J Maas, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. We Met in December, which I gave a 1 out of 5 stars, and One Day in December, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So moving on into January, I first read A Promised Land by Barack Obama, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Enigma Game by Elizabeth Wein, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. And The Awakening by Nora Roberts, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, moving on into February, I first read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm Still Here by Austen Channing Brown, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Beneath the Keep by Erika Johansen, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Stay Up From the Beginning by Ibram x Kendi, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. And A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Alrighty, so moving on to my top 5 books of the winter. The first one would have to be The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. And I've never read any of Victoria Schwab's books in the past, so this is like my first foray into her writing. But I was really intrigued by the premise of this one. I found it to be really interesting and intriguing. And so it basically follows Addie, who is a woman who is fleeing on her wedding day in the early 1700s, and so she ends up making a deal with the devil that she does not want to belong to anyone. So he ends up twisting those words, and essentially no one will remember who she is anymore. She can basically have a full conversation with someone, walk out of the room, and come back and they won't remember who she is. So she's basically navigated 3 centuries of this with no one kind of remembering who she is, and finding little ways that she can leave her impact on the world, either through being like the muse of like artists and musicians and like those type of things. So she is it's kind of very much a game of cat and mouse, because the devil is trying to get her to kind of basically give up, and so she would give her soul to him, and she's determined not to. And all that kind of changes when she walks into a bookstore and she's remembered by someone, and it kind of goes off from there. But I think this part was really interesting. I think the concept of being forgotten, I think, was really interesting, and seeing how Addie kind of navigated that and kind of found loopholes to the system by leaving her imprint on these people. And you can kind of see how she's been the muse to these like artists throughout the centuries, and just I think was just really interesting and very well done. And I also like seeing her kind of live through all these major world events like the French Revolution, World War I, World War II, and all that. And just like like I said, the game of cat and like tug of war basically between, and the battle of wills between her and the devil, I think was really interesting, because they're both kind of playing each other and they're both not wanting to give up, and I think that was really well done. I think my biggest complaint though was that it was a little heavy on the romance, and the character that Addie kind of falls in love with, I felt like he had it very much as a woe is me mentality. Like I felt like he very much victimized himself in a way that it was just like a little bit too annoying. And I really was like, Addie's been going through this for like 300 years and you are like literally not even a year into it. So like I was playing my small little violin for him basically. But other than that, besides being too much on the romance, I really loved the kind of twist at the end. Like I just really loved it. The writing was really good. So yeah, as being my first Victoria Schwab book, I was very much impressed by this one. I don't think I'm interested in any of her other ones so far, but this one is definitely worth all the hype. Next up, it would have to be The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I've been a huge Kristen Hanna fan for like 10 years now. I think I read my first book in 2011 when I was in grade 12, and I've ever since kind of fallen in love with her writing. So I was very excited for this one when it came out. I didn't even read the synopsis. I literally just dove right into it. But this essentially follows a girl named Elsa who is never really loved by her family. They kind of just like push her off to the side and just ignore her. So when she ends up making a mistake with this guy, she ends up getting kind of forced into this loveless marriage. And so we follow her and her family's journey kind of through their experience of the Great Depression, specifically focusing on the Dust Bowl kind of area of that history. So we kind of follow her and her family's kind of struggle for survival, and ultimately kind of Elsa's kind of growth and development into finding her voice and kind of being brave and all that. So I really like this one. I think Kristen Hanna does a really good job at writing like stories of survival and of different survival stories, and I think this one is no different. Like, I felt so much anxiety throughout this whole book because I was just waiting for something bad to happen, and yeah, I was on my tip of my toes, and I totally felt for these characters and just kind of was shocked about the kind of horrible things that they had to kind of experience during this time in a system that wasn't really set up for them to succeed. And yeah, and of course with all Kristen Hanna books there's a few tears scattered throughout, so you know that's how she has a way of really connecting the reader to the story and the characters, and this one I think was really good, and especially because it focused on a good point in history that I wasn't that well aware of. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. So next up, this is a nonfiction book, and it is Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram x Kendi, and this is a book that was actually given to me by a subscriber, so it's very near and dear to my heart. But essentially this is a definitive history of racist ideas in America and how basically throughout history events and people have contributed to the racist ideology and kind of paradigm and the systemic system of it, and how eventually we've ended up where we are kind of now in modern day. And this book is split into 4 kind of different parts, following 4 different people who have contributed to these racist ideologies throughout history. And so you can kind of see how their kind of quest for kind of maintaining power and kind of having that dominance over Black people, how those lies that they spread, you can kind of see how those web of those lies kind of have been kind of traveled throughout history. And I think this author does a really good job. It's very well researched. It's very difficult to read because of how upsetting and like the horrible things people did to like Black people is just harrowing. Like, it's upsetting, and I spread this out over the course of February, so I read a chapter a day basically, and then like 2 on the weekend. But I think that's the way to do it because it totally allows you to kind of like process and think these through, and it made me kind of well aware of the system that has been set up and like why it is the way that it is, and how I've unintentionally been contributing to kind of these racist ideologies and paradigms. And so it's made me more aware of how I can kind of fight the system and become more of a anti-racist. So this one I think is very important. I think this is a book that everyone needs to read like once in their lifetime because you can get so much out of it. So yeah, this one was just honestly amazing, and I think everyone, like I said, needs to read this. Next up, I have Beneath the Keep, which is the prequel to the Queen of the Tearling trilogy. And I know this trilogy can be very polarizing for a lot of people. I particularly liked how it ended because I felt like it was very bittersweet and kind of fit with the kind of overall kind of feeling of the trilogy. But this one follows Kelsey's mother Alyssa, and then we also get Mace's background and how he eventually became a Queen's Guard. And so I really like this one. I think it did a really good job at establishing background to a lot of these characters and histories that we as the reader weren't really aware of, because Kelsey is kept in the dark for a lot of this, and we get a lot of character development as well for particularly the Mace, where we kind of are aware of this character, but he doesn't get a lot of character development because it's not really necessary to Kelsey's narrative. And it does just a tremendous job at just expanding on the world and the history of the Tearling and how we kind of see that crumble, and it does give us a lot of answers to our questions that weren't really like answered in the original trilogy. A lot of the kind of secrets and everything that the kind of characters kept Kelsey in the dark pertaining to her mother is really much kind of played out here. So I'd recommend reading the original trilogy first because you'll be spoiled on some of the stuff in here. But yeah, I think this was a really good prequel. I think even if you did not like how the Tearling ended, but you're still interested in the political intrigue, sorry, I'm getting an email, the political intrigue, the just kind of the history of the Tearling, I think you guys would enjoy this. So yeah.
Okay. I found this on the web for history of the Tearling. I think this. Check it out.
Thanks, Siri. Oh, that's never happened before. But okay. But I've kind of lost where I was talking about. But if you like all that history of the Tearling and want to kind of get more out of it, that kind of world and how complex it is, then I think you will really enjoy this book. Sorry, Siri kind of just threw me through a loop now. I've never had that happen before. And lastly, I have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, and I was very much anticipating this book. I know there's a lot of flaws in Sarah J. Maas's work and just all that. I'm well aware of these flaws, but this is like my guilty pleasure read, and so I was really looking forward to this. I think me and my friend read this for our book club, and so it was a lot of fun and it provided me with a good distraction. My parents tested positive for COVID kind of mid-February, right when this book came out, and luckily me and my siblings have tested negative throughout kind of their 2-week quarantine, and so I have to do another one next week just to make sure. But for some reason me and my siblings didn't get COVID, but the initial kind of when everything hit the fan with that really kind of scared all of us, and so this book kind of provided me with that distraction to kind of just lose myself in another reality, because my reality was a little bit terrifying. But this follows Nesta's story kind of post-war, where she's dealing a lot with PTSD and she's being very self-destructive. So everyone in the Night Court is like on their last straw, and they're like, you need to get your act together, so we're sending you to train with Cassian, and it kind of goes off from there. But it also lays down like the political kind of climate that this kind of world is in now, specifically kind of with unresolved ties of the war that weren't necessarily kind of finished with at the end of the last one. But I really liked it. Like I said, these are my guilty pleasures. It provides me with a distraction. Like, I love this world and this character, like these characters, I just really loved it, and the last like quarter of the book was just super intense and a lot of fun. So I really liked it. The only reason why I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 stars is just for pure enjoyment, because it was a little bit too heavy on the smut. Like, it was like dialed up to 11. Like, I feel like she's progressively got more graphic with each book, and this one was like total cringe. Like, I just like skipped it, and like she would add like some of the dialogue, like they would like talk during it, and it was just like cringe. So yeah, that part wasn't my favorite, but I still really loved the story of this, and you know, this world. Like, I will forever love this like series now, I guess. But I'm hoping with Elaine's character those scenes will be kind of, you know, brought down a bit. But yeah, nevertheless, despite the flaws of this and like the problematic issues of it, I still really enjoy it. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your top 5 books are from this winter and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.